Incredibly, two self-proclaimed HOA officers tried to arrest a man in his own driveway for supposedly breaking community rules. The catch, the neighborhood didn't even have an HOA. For months, these imposters had been impersonating law enforcement, shaking down residents, especially the elderly, for bogus fines. However, they made their biggest mistake this time. Their target was Chief Marcus Miller, the town's actual chief of police, and he had his own way of handling fake cops. What followed was a spectacular takedown that had the whole town buzzing. The day had been long too long, and Chief Marcus Miller was feeling every second of it. 20 hours on duty, back-to-back shifts, a case that refused to wrap up, and a pile of paperwork that threatened to drown him. Being chief of police in a quiet suburban town wasn't supposed to be this draining. Sure, there were the occasional break-ins, domestic disputes, and the odd drunk driver who thought they could outrun a cruiser. But mostly, it was about keeping the peace. And right now, peace was the only thing he craved. As he pulled into his driveway, his thoughts were already drifting toward a scalding hot shower and the promise of a half-decent meal, maybe something that didn't come from a takeout bag for once. He let out a tired breath, running a hand through his graying hair before shifting the car into park. Suddenly, flashing lights pierced the twilight, not police blue and red, but orange and white. The cheap kind. The kind you could pick up online for $50, slap onto your car, and pretend you were someone important. Chief Miller barely had time to process before two men in tactical vests stormed up his driveway like they owned the place, their strides screaming power trip. One, let's call him Gary, was tall and wiry, his shoulders squared as if he'd been practicing authority in the mirror. The other, Dave, was stockier built, like a guy who peaked in high school football and never quite got over it. Both wore black cargo pants and matching vests with HOA enforcement emblazoned across the front in bold, self-important letters. Chief Miller had spent 25 years on the force. He'd worked with local cops, state troopers, and even some feds when the occasion called for it. And in all that time, he'd never not once seen anything remotely like this. The stocky one, Dave, barked first. "You hands where we can see them." For a split second, Miller wondered if he was hallucinating. Maybe the exhaustion had finally pushed him into some fever dream of suburban lunacy. Then, Gary, the wiry one, jumped in his voice, dripping with an authority he absolutely hadn't earned. "You're in violation of HOA covenants. Step away from the vehicle." Miller just blinked. "Excuse me." Dave puffed out his chest, clearly savoring the moment. "We've had complaints." Oh, this was going to be good, Miller thought. Unauthorized fencing. Dave continued ticking points off on his fingers like he was reading from an imaginary ticket book. Non-compliant driveway color, and multiple reports of hostile behavior toward HOA officials. Miller stared, not in shock, but in pure, unfiltered disbelief. He let the words settle for a beat before stating as evenly as possible, "I don't live in an HOA." Gary barely hesitated. "Doesn't matter." His tone sharpened as if Miller had personally insulted him. "We enforce compliance everywhere in the community. You can either cooperate or will be forced to take action." That's when Miller noticed it, the cheap plastic handcuffs hanging from Dave's belt. A switch flipped. Instantly, the exhaustion vanished, the sluggishness from a 20-hour shift gone. All that remained was pure professional clarity. Because these guys weren't just some HOA busybodies waving a clipboard around. No, they were playing cop, and that kind of stupidity could get somebody killed. But the best part, they had absolutely no idea who they were messing with. Miller didn't flinch. He had faced down cartel enforcers, armed fugitives, and tweaked-out meth heads with nothing to lose. But this was a new level of stupid. Two nobodies playing dress-up cops, standing in his driveway, acting like they had the authority to do anything other than hand out passive-aggressive letters about lawn height. So he kept his stance relaxed, not out of fear, but out of complete and utter control, because that's what really intimidated guys like this confidence. His voice stayed calm even. "Do you have a badge?" Dave huffed, shifting his weight like a kid caught unprepared in class. But he covered it quickly, rolling his shoulders back as he sneered, "We're HOA enforcement officers. We don't need your approval to enforce our laws." "Our laws?" Miller exhaled slowly through his nose. Oh, this was definitely going to be fun. Gary's mouth tugged into a smirk, a self-satisfied little expression that almost made Miller want to laugh. "We got a call about a suspicious person on this property. You match the description." And just like that, the game revealed itself. Miller felt it, the slow burn in his chest. Not fear, not nerves, but rage, because he knew this tactic. He had seen it too many times before. The kind of vague accusation designed to force people into submission, make someone doubt their own innocence, make them second-guess themselves, make them feel guilty just for standing there. It was a scare tactic, a power trip, and these two were drunk on it. They thought they had authority. They thought they were the law, and they had no clue who they were talking to. Miller let the silence stretch, letting the weight of his unimpressed stare sink in. Then finally he spoke. "I suggest you leave," he said, his voice perfectly even, "before you get yourselves into serious trouble." Dave's face split into a grin, and then he laughed, a deep, mocking laugh, full of certainty, amusement, and pure, unfiltered stupidity. "We're not going anywhere." His tone oozed arrogance, as if he had already won. "Matter of fact, you're under arrest for trespassing on HOA land." Miller actually chuckled this time, shaking his head. "My property is HOA land now." Gary's eyes darkened. And then he made the mistake. He reached for his handcuffs, plastic cheap, the kind a kid might get in a Halloween cop costume set. Then came the words that sealed their fate. "Last warning, on the ground now." And just like that, they were done. Because Miller moved fast, too fast for them to react. His right hand snatched Gary's wrist, mid-air, twisting it at an angle just sharp enough to make the guy buckle, but not enough to break it. In one fluid motion, Miller yanked the cheap plastic handcuffs away, his movements so fast, so practiced, that Gary hadn't even processed what happened yet. Dave stumbled back, blinking like he'd just watched a magic trick he didn't understand. "What the?" Miller took a step forward, reaching into his back pocket. A moment later, his real badge was inches from their faces. "Chief of Police," silence. Glorious, deafening silence. And then the realization hit them like a freight train. All the bravado, all the fake authority, all the confidence gone. Gary's mouth opened and closed, his brain seemingly short-circuiting in real time. Dave looked like he was about 5 seconds away from throwing up. Miller tilted his head slightly. "Something wrong." Dave swallowed hard. Gary tried. We didn't mean, this is just, we're just trying to keep the community safe." Miller stared at them, and then finally a smirk touched his lips. "Yeah," he said, flipping the plastic handcuffs in his grip. "How's that working out for you?" Dave gulped, his bravado crumbling like a cheap suit in the rain. Gone was the arrogance, the puffed-up chest, the condescending smirk. In its place stood a man who just realized he'd royally screwed up. "Oh, this is all a misunderstanding?" His voice was higher now, wobbling at the edges. Gary nodded so fast, Miller thought his neck might snap clean off. "Yeah, we're just trying to keep the neighborhood safe." "Safe?" Miller let that word hang in the air, letting them squirm under the weight of it. Then he folded his arms and tilted his head. by impersonating law enforcement, by trying to arrest people in their own driveways. Neither of them had an answer for that. Dave's voice wavered. "Look, we were just enforcing HOA policy." Miller cut him off like a blade. "Where'd you get those vests?" "Oh, shh." Silence. They froze like deer caught in headlights. Miller could almost hear the gears in their heads grinding, searching for an excuse that wouldn't sound as stupid as their entire operation. He didn't wait. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, closing the distance. "Because I know they don't issue those at homeowners association meetings." Still, nothing. Miller's voice sharpened. "Where'd you get those handcuffs?" Another step. "Where'd you get the lights on your car, the radios?" Gary cracked first. We got them online," he blurted. "It's not illegal, we just wanted to keep people in line." Miller's blood boiled. Not illegal. They weren't just pretending to be cops. They were terrorizing their own neighbors. How many people had they bullied into compliance? How many times had an elderly homeowner been forced to pay some bogus fine just to get these two lunatics off their porch? How many times had they flipped on those fake police lights and made some poor family believe they were about to get arrested? Miller had seen real criminals before, but these guys, they were something else. They were pathetic. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "This is Chief Miller," he said, his voice calm and sharp as a blade. "Send a unit to my address. I have 2 suspects impersonating officers possibly involved in fraudulent activity." Dave paled so fast, Miller thought he might faint. Wait, no. Gary threw up his hands, practically vibrating with panic. "Please, we were just trying to help." Miller tilted his head, a slow smirk creeping onto his face. The same smirk they had worn when they tried to arrest him. "Tell it to the judge." When the real police cruiser arrived, its blue and red lights painting the street, it wasn't even a contest. There was no shouting, no resistance, no last-minute escape attempts. The second those flashing lights hit them, Dave and Gary completely lost their nerve. Miller didn't even need to say a word. He just stood there, arms crossed, watching the show. Dave was the first to crack. His whole demeanor changed in an instant. His puffed-up chest deflated, his shoulders slumped, and that smug arrogance he'd been throwing around vanished. Now, he just looked like a guy who really regretted his life choices. "Oh, officer, hey, this is just a misunderstanding." His voice was different now, weaker, desperate. Gary, meanwhile, was having a full-blown meltdown. He fidgeted, looking around like he was debating whether to run, but already knew it wouldn't end well. His breathing turned shallow, his hands flicking up as if he wanted to plead his case, but couldn't get the words out fast enough. "Well, what? We can explain. This is just... We were just trying to help the community." Miller finally let out a slow, deliberate sigh. Then, just to rub it in, he cocked his head slightly and asked, "Oh, and how's that working out for you?" Neither of them answered. Instead, they just stood there, frozen, as the real officers, professionals, trained law enforcement, actual cops, stepped onto the driveway. Miller didn't need to give them much detail. "These two were impersonating law enforcement. They tried to arrest me in my own driveway." He handed over the cheap plastic cuffs he'd confiscated. "They also have a fake patrol car parked down the street with flashing lights." The officers didn't even hesitate. "Turn around." Gary yelped, actually yelped like a scared puppy. Dave put his hands up instantly. Whoa, what? We were just enforcing community policies. We're part of the HOA." The officer cuffing him didn't even blink. "Yeah, tell it to the judge." Once the cuffs were securely fastened, the real officers searched their vehicle. And that's when things got so much worse for Dave and Gary. Inside, they found fake IDs, stacks of bogus violation notices demanding penalty fees from residents, and some documents that even looked like official HOA court summons, which was so illegal that Miller actually had to suppress a laugh. And then the cherry on top, video evidence. Oh yes, these two morons had been recording themselves while they ran their fake cop operation. The footage showed them shaking down homeowners, barking orders, demanding money, and threatening to have people removed from the neighborhood if they didn't comply. And the worst part, most of their victims were elderly. Miller felt his jaw tighten as he flipped through one of the confiscated folders containing names, addresses, and fine amounts. Some people had been forced to hand over hundreds of dollars just to avoid arrest. That's when Miller felt something shift inside him. Before this was just annoying some wannabe cops on a power trip throwing their weight around, pretending to be something they weren't. But now he saw them for what they really were, predators. They hadn't just been playing cop, they had been terrorizing people. And if Miller hadn't caught them tonight, they would have kept going. They might have escalated. They might have hurt someone. Miller took a slow, deep breath, schooling his expression back into neutral calm as Gary tried one last, desperate plea. "We didn't do anything that bad." He was visibly shaking now. We were just trying to make people follow the rules." Miller finally stepped forward, his boots crunching against the gravel driveway as he came to stand directly in front of them. "You weren't enforcing anything." His voice was low, cold, dangerous. Dave gulped hard, his Adam's apple bobbing frantically. Gary tried again, his voice cracking. We were just trying to make the neighborhood better." Miller took another step forward, leaning in just enough so they could feel the weight of every word that came next. "You see, real cops protect their communities." He let that sink in. Then, in a voice that could have frozen fire, he finished, "You preyed on yours," Gary whimpered. Dave shut his eyes as if wishing himself out of existence. Then click. The squad car door slammed shut. The second the cruiser rolled off, Miller exhaled not out of relief, but satisfaction, because he knew exactly what was coming next. Within 24 hours, the story exploded across town. The actual HOA, who naturally had likely been more than happy to let these guys run rampant when it benefited them, immediately threw Dave and Gary under the bus. "We had no knowledge of their actions," they insisted. "We do not condone impersonation of law enforcement, right? But the damage was already done." By the end of the week, several homeowners pressed charges, especially the elderly residents who had been bullied into paying made-up fines. Some had drained their savings, believing they were avoiding real legal trouble. By the end of the month, the case even made national news, and Chief Miller, he finally got that hot shower. He finally let the tension bleed from his shoulders as steam filled the bathroom, washing away the exhaustion of a 20-hour shift of fake arrests and the sheer stupidity of the human race. And as the water poured over him, he thought to himself, "This is why I do this job. Not for the paperwork, not for the headaches, but for nights like this, where he could shut down the worst kind of people. The wannabe cops, the predators in uniforms they didn't deserve, the ones who thought power was a game, right up until they met someone who actually knew how to play." This incident serves as a crucial reminder. Always verify authority. Be wary of anyone demanding money, access, or compliance, especially if they seem unofficial, overly aggressive, or operate outside standard procedures. Don't be intimidated by uniforms or titles alone. Know your rights within your community, like whether an HOA actually exists and what its powers are, and never hesitate to contact official law enforcement if you suspect someone is impersonating authority or engaging in suspicious activity. Your vigilance protects not only yourself, but your neighbors as well. What are your thoughts on this encounter? Have you ever dealt with suspicious individuals claiming authority? Share your experiences in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. In the days and weeks that followed, life in the quiet neighborhood of Willow Drive slowly, cautiously began to find its familiar rhythm again. The police patrol cars stopped cruising by quite as often. Neighbors, once perhaps wary of unexpected shadows on their porches, began to leave their porch lights on again, not necessarily out of lingering fear, but more as a quiet, shared gesture of community solidarity and renewed watchfulness. Inside their home, Evelyn Hayes grew stronger each day. Her bruises faded from deep purple to soft yellow, and the familiar sparkle gradually returned to her eyes. The only visible lasting mark of that terrible night was a small, pale scar just above her right eyebrow, a faint, permanent reminder of how perilously close darkness had come to their doorstep. But Evelyn wore it not as a wound, but almost as a badge of quiet resilience. Arthur remained much the same, steady, present, quietly vigilant. He still polished the old Colt 1911 once a week, carefully, methodically, the way he had done for decades. Not out of fear, not out of anger, but simply because he understood, perhaps better than most, that peace was a precious, fragile thing worth protecting. Deep down, however, he sincerely hoped he would never again have reason to raise it in defense. Time, as it always does, carried them forward. When spring arrived, blooming across the neighborhood, the neighbors organized the first community barbecue of the year. It was a simple, comfortable affair of folding chairs, paper plates, burgers sizzling on grills, and the easy, unburdened laughter of families gathered together under a soft blue Texas sky. Arthur and Evelyn arrived a little late, walking slowly hand in hand as always. Conversations hushed for just a moment as people turned to greet them, warm smiles breaking across faces young and old. Then someone, no one remembered exactly who started it, raised a plastic cup high into the warm afternoon air. To Arthur and Evelyn, they called out clearly. The crowd picked up the toast instantly, their voices rising loud and proud, filled with genuine affection and respect. To Arthur and Evelyn, proof that courage doesn't have an expiration date. Arthur, slightly embarrassed but visibly touched, simply tipped his hat in acknowledgement and pulled Evelyn just a little closer to his side. Mary laughed, a sound as clear and bright as a ringing bell, and for the first time in a long while, surrounded by the warmth of their community, the two of them truly let themselves relax. Somehow, the food tasted sweeter that day, the laughter rang louder, and the worries that had weighed down so many hearts seemed, at least for a little while, to lift away entirely on the gentle spring breeze. In that moment, under the wide Texas sky, surrounded by friends and neighbors who cared, it truly felt as if the world, or at least their small corner of it, had found its balance again. Perhaps a little older, certainly a little wiser, but also in the way that mattered most, demonstrably safer. This story powerfully reminds us that courage isn't limited to battlefields or grand heroic stages. It resides within ordinary people, often hidden until circumstances demand it. Arthur Hayes, a man defined by a past war, demonstrated that the instinct to protect loved ones and defend one's home remains potent throughout life. It highlights the strength found in quiet resolve, the importance of vigilance, and the profound difference one individual's bravery can make not just for themselves, but for an entire community. It teaches us that true strength often lies not in aggression, but in the unwavering commitment to do what is right, especially when facing darkness. What are your thoughts on Arthur's actions and the community's response? Do you believe the castle doctrine was rightly applied here? Share your opinions in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more true stories of courage and justice. Thanks for watching.